What's up, guys? We are live for today's AMA. Today I am joined by Susie Hickson from theprivatelabellawyer.com. Susie, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Greg?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on to join us today. So guys, if you aren't familiar with our AMAs, throughout the $1 Million Case Study, every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we are doing a live Ask Me Anything session. Today, Susie is joining us because she is an attorney that specializes in IP and specifically trademarks. And is very familiar with the matter. So let us know whatever questions you guys have for us. I'm happy to answer anything Amazon related and anything that's more suited for a lawyer like Susie to answer. We'll be happy to have her do so. So Susie, go ahead and get started. You want to just give us a quick 30-second background about yourself?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me, Greg. I'm really, really happy to be here and excited to try to answer some questions. I'm really excited and passionate about trademark law. I've been an IP attorney for 15 years and specifically a trademark attorney for probably about 12 of those. I started out specifically with patent work, and it was just a little too boring for me. I like the fast-paced work more of, a trademark law. There's a lot of creativity with it. And I get to work with a lot of people who are involved in the marketing side of their company. So that's a little bit about me. I did sell a product on Amazon several years ago, and I got to learn a whole lot about the private label process. And I realized, oh my gosh, there are so many people who really, really need help in this specific space. I can really help them. So here I am.
Cool. Yeah, thank you very much. We already have tons and tons of questions, so let's go ahead and dig into them. The first one, this one's for you, Susie. It says, this is a YouTube question. I got my domain name for my brand a long time ago. Can this substantiate first use of a trademark?
Okay, that is an awesome question, and one I get a lot. And let me go ahead and preface this, and I should have mentioned this a minute ago, that I'm not giving legal advice, I'm giving legal guidance. And if you have specific issues, I recommend that you hire an attorney. So there's my blurb that I have to do. So anyway, but your domain name, unfortunately, will not suffice for purposes of first use because the USPTO considers it just an address or a placeholder. So unfortunately, just having control that domain name will not satisfy first use. And you actually have to be moving your product of interstate commerce and have that trademark on the product or packaging. Your e-commerce website, if you take a screenshot of your e-commerce website, that could substantiate use of your trademark.
Cool. Thank you very much for that one. Another good YouTube question for you, Susie, is they said, when can I use the little TM versus the R with the circle around it?
Oh, that's such a great question and such a popular question. So it's good. Your TM, you can use that anytime that you are claiming rights to that particular trademark. And you don't even have to have a pending application to use the TM. So let's say that you rolled out a new product and you selected a trademark for it. You can go ahead, whenever you have your product packaging designed, and use the TM next to it. And that's putting third parties in the world on notice that you're claiming rights to that. And that's a really good thing to do because in the US, we honor common law rights of trademark usage. So your R in the circle, however, is reserved, kind of remember it that way, R in the circle reserved for a registered trademark. So don't be slapping that R in the circle on there until you get that trademark registered.
Great. Thank you very much for that answer. This one from YouTube from Sally Ma. I'll answer this one. It says, who puts the FN Skew on the product, the supplier, the freight forwarder? Sally Ma, to answer that question is I would recommend that you do not use the FN Skew barcode stickers, but instead just print it directly on your packaging. The only real reason you wouldn't want to do this is if you're selling through different channels, like if you're selling on Amazon and Walmart and like eBay or something else, then it makes sense to have the UPC barcode on there. But otherwise, there's no reason you don't just print it directly on your packaging. That being said, if you have already designed your packaging and the FN Skew barcode is not already printed on there, I would just ask the factory, the supplier, to put the labels on for you. So hopefully that answers that one. Let's see. from Online Sports on YouTube, it said, do you have to register trademarks in multiple countries if you intend to sell them anywhere besides your native country? Susie, is that one you're able to answer?
Yes. Yeah, so your trademarks and the grant of your trademark right is jurisdictional. So if you file for and get a registration for a US trademark, your rights to that trademark are going to only extend through the US and its territories, right? But if you want to sell products in the European Union, for example, you're going to need to file for protection of that mark in the European Union or Australia, Japan, China. Those are all, jurisdiction based places to file. Some countries, well, actually, I guess all countries besides the US, they honor first to file. So it's really important if you are moving product in the EU or internationally to try to get your mark registered sooner rather than later. And my experience has been that if you want to enforce any trademark rights on the Amazon platform, in the EU, Germany, Spain, the UK, you're going to need to have registrations in those jurisdictions.
Excellent. Thank you for that one. Here's another good question for you, Susie. And this one, they ask, does it cost to trademark your brand name for each class of goods? You understand what that question's asking?
Yeah. Yeah. So there are 45 classes that are defined by the Nice Convention, and that's NICE, and it sounds like nice, but it's Nice. And 34 of those are for goods, and numbers 35 through 45 are for services. And so your products that you select are going to fall in one of the first of the 34 goods, right? The first ones. For example, if you are importing pillows and you want to file a trademark application for pillows, your class is going to be class 20. If you're doing mattress pads, your class is going to be class 24. Apparel tends to be in class 25. Games tend to be in class 28. Sporting goods tend to be in class 28. So you kind of get the idea that depending on what the product is, you have to classify. And yes, unfortunately, every single class is an additional fee of about $275. So there are some, when you think about how quickly that can add up, you obviously have some motivation to, try to maybe stick with a particular class. Like, for example, if you're doing kitchenwares and you're doing garlic presses and spatulas, they're going to probably generally all fall in the same class. So that's something I think that is important to think ahead whenever you're doing your product selection, is how you're going to approach this from a trademark perspective. Because if you're filing in 10 different classes, first of all, you need to ask yourself if that makes sense from a branding standpoint. But second of all, you're obviously looking at really, really high USPTO fees.
Awesome. Another great answer. I'll take this one. This is from David Mock on YouTube. David asks, if you list a product on Amazon before you are brand registered, can you later come back and edit that product with all the additional brand registered listing benefits once you actually have the registered brand? And the answer to that, David, is yes. So keep in mind, there's a lot of talk around brand registry, and it does give you a few nice benefits, but it's by no means required on Amazon. All right. So don't let that slow you down or stop you from getting started selling on Amazon. Go ahead and sell your products, go ahead and create the listing. You can always, get a trademark and register for brand registry down the road. So that's by no means a requirement. It's more like a nice to have, kind of like down the road. All right. Chris on YouTube asks, Susie, can you explain how we should approach design copyrights? If multiple people sell similar designs, a sash or a banner on Amazon, they don't own the graphics, how to check who owns it?
That's I'll just be honest, I don't focus in copyright law. This is probably something that would be better answered by a copyright lawyer. If you want me to give a referral at some point, I'd be happy to do that. But generally, I will tell you that searching for copyright designs with the Library of Congress is extraordinarily hard. If you see a particular design that's just being pervasively used, there's a really good chance it's in the public domain. Okay. I can't promise that. I don't know. It is wise to do due diligence if you can. But to actually dig into the Copyright Office website and have that searching done, you would probably need to talk to a copyright attorney specifically who does that.
Cool.
I'm sorry I couldn't provide a better answer in that situation.
Brian asked a brand registry question on YouTube. Brian Cunningham. Can you have multiple items listed under brand registry, but have different enhanced brand content for each individual ASIN? Different photos and content for each. Yes, you can list as many products as you want under one brand name in the brand registry program. And the enhanced brand content is just independent for each individual ASIN. So the answer to that question is yes, no worries there. Julian Master asked, what is a good tool to use to register a trademark for business? Susie, do you maybe just want to speak a little bit about the process that you go through to register a trademark? It looks like that's kind of what they're getting at.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the trademark application and registration process tends to be more protracted than what people tend to expect. It tends to last longer. And, a lot of people are like, oh, why is it taking so long? Well, the first thing I tell people that they need to do, and Greg was awesome, like whenever you put on your attorney suit the other day, you talked about this, about doing some of your own clearance searching. It's a really good idea to do that before you file. You can do a lot of that on your own. You can have a lawyer do some of the clearance searching for you, and we have some methods and strategies and options typically that are even more in depth. Those types of searches are typically recommended. They're not required. They help you maybe alleviate some risk going forward with a particular mark and give you a little more confidence in your branding. I hesitate to encourage anyone spending, $25,000, $50,000 on a new brand rollout until you at least get to a certain stage of the application process. But when you selected your trademark, you can, and by all means should, go ahead and start using the mark before you even file, if you can. Assuming you're not infringing anyone else, you're good to go. When you file your trademark application, and I'm going to speak only to the U.S. because every jurisdiction is different. When you file in the U.S., you'll get a filing date, the date that you file it, and a reference number. And after that, it's a waiting period. It's like you're in trademark purgatory for 3 to 4 months. There's just this crazy backlog with the USPTO, and it just takes that long before an examining attorney will pick up the application for review. And that examining attorney's review is actually really the first hurdle that you have to overcome before the trademark application can proceed. And there are numerous reasons, that they could reject your application. And sometimes there are really easy issues to overcome. Maybe you just need to, maybe you misspelled something in the goods description, right? And they just want to help you out a little bit. It's a procedural issue. There could be substantive issues with your office, with your application. You could have received a refusal to register based on a likelihood of confusion with a prior filed application. Hopefully you've done your searching, just as Greg advised, before you file, and you'll help alleviate that. It happens. I've found over the last few years that the USPTO seems to be a lot more generous in the issuing of office actions based on the likelihood of confusion. So it's almost like a mandate is handed down to issue more refusals, don't let so many applications get through. But a likelihood of confusion with a prior filed application is an issue that you can deal with in the application process. Assuming that you get through that obstacle or that hurdle, your application will be published for opposition, and that's another 30-day period where third parties are given an opportunity to oppose your application. It's usually not problematic. Every now and then you'll get an opposition lodged against you. A lot of times it's by a large company. You'll recognize the name immediately. They're very aggressive in monitoring and enforcing their trademarks, as you should be as trademark owners at some point. And after you get through the opposition period, your mark should go under registration, or your mark will be allowed, assuming you haven't already showed the USPTO that you're using the mark. Because there's a little bit of a catch-22 here. You have to show the USPTO that you're using the trademark in commerce before they'll actually issue the registration number.
All right, thank you.
I just put like an 8 to 10 month process in like 2 minutes.
Cool. And that's the general time frame, because that was another question that a couple of people asked, like general time frame from start to finish. You have a guideline there?
One of the I had a smooth one go through the other day, and it was about 7 months. I was really excited about it.
Okay.
That's the exception, not the rule.
All right, cool. There's a few questions about brand registry that I'm happy to ask. Michelle Ellis said, if you have a trademark, does it cost money to do the brand registry in Amazon? The answer to that's no, it's free to do on Amazon. Another brand registry question is, does Amazon require a registered trademark to register seller's brand in their brand registry? The answer to this is yes. This didn't used to be the case, and I forget, probably like a year and a half ago, maybe longer than that now, I don't know. They do now require a registered trademark in order to register for the brand registry program. A lot of registers in there.
Can I say something about that real quick, Greg?
Yeah.
One thing that's interesting that Amazon allows is a European Union registration for purposes of brand registry. And if you are moving product in the European Union, you should really consider filing in the European Union, because the process is a lot faster. They're way more efficient than we are, apparently. And you can get that registration a lot faster in the EU. So then you can enroll it in brand registry. So something to kind of think about when you're developing that strategy.
Yeah, nice little hack there. I like that. And then I think I heard once, I don't know if this is necessarily true, that if you have an EU registered trademark, that works for the US brand registry, but not vice versa. Do you know if that's accurate?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
I don't know the answer to that.
Cool. All right. Another YouTube question from TomTube. To file for a trademark before the product is ready for sale, will my pre-sales website or pictures of packaging meet the requirement that the trademark is currently used in commerce? Does that make sense?
I think so, but I think it really comes down to how you would define that pre-sale and what it would look like. And typically something like that would probably work. One thing you have to be a little bit careful about is just token use of a trademark in an effort to try to get your mark onto registration. If you're doing something, you're filing something that's not really above board, that actually could weaken your eventual registration and make you subject to cancellation. So my advice in that situation is, if you're selling a few products here and there, you don't have to be mass selling on. If you have them on your website and you've sold 5 products, that's use. You're selling the product. You're transporting them in commerce. And I think that would substantiate. But if you've sold one product, you called your friend Bob up and said, "Hey Bob, will you get on Amazon and purchase this product for me?" That's token, and I would be very cautious of doing something like that.
Cool. We have another question from Matt Keeley on YouTube that asks about the EU trademark process. Are you familiar with that at all, Susie?
I know it's a lot faster. And sometimes I do file in the EU, but that's via what's called the Madrid Protocol. So basically you take your US filing and push the application into certain jurisdictions that you specified. And so I have filed in the EU for clients. And typically the applications have gone through very smoothly. If I've had problems, if I've run into any obstacles that require a substantive response, I do have European counsel who I give that to them to handle. So I guess it sort of just depends on what the question is, if I can provide any feedback or guidance.
Cool. We have another question from Stephen D that we can probably both talk about, Susie. It says, does it make sense in your opinion to create a fictive brand name that is not related to a category and then have multiple products from different categories under that brand. And I guess there's a few different considerations when you're thinking about creating your brand name. I personally like doing something along those lines. So an example of this would just be like I'm looking at a TV remote right here. It's called Spectra. Like I wouldn't really know what a brand name called Spectra would necessarily represent. Maybe there's some ideas kind of like tied with that. But the nice thing about doing kind of like a generic or fictive brand name, kind of like as you described it, is then you can sell multiple products on it under that brand name on Amazon, and then only have to register the trademark in order to get brand registry once. Suze, is there anything you kind of like to add to that, or do you have an opinion that differs?
No, I agree. I do tell people, I do like to discourage people from selecting descriptive marks because they're very difficult to register with the USPTO and they're hard to enforce.
Can you give us an example of a descriptive mark real quick?
Honey Baked Ham Company.
Okay.
Y'all, do you have that in Austin?
Oh yeah, I think those are nationwide.
Yeah, I think they are, but I always like to ask. So Honey Baked Ham Company is an example of a descriptive trademark, right? Like when you hear that, what do you think? It's the company that makes honey baked hams.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And they've got it registered. Well, generally getting a registration for a descriptive mark is difficult. And what will happen is when you file an application, if you cannot successfully convince the USPTO that it's not descriptive, your resort might be having to amend it to the supplemental register. And the catch here is that supplemental registered marks are not eligible for brand registry enrollment. Okay, but I always tell people, don't get so hung up on Amazon. Like, let's look at the entire branding pictures. So that's just something to think about, when you're doing your strategy, you're selecting your brand. So Honey Baked Ham Company is a company that started out with a descriptive trademark, but they acquired distinctiveness in the trademark over time because they were the exclusive user of that mark. They enforced, they filed and things like that. So they were able to gain strength in the trademark. I think actually you mentioned this Tuesday, kind of squishing words together, portmanteaus.
Yeah. What do you think about brand names like that?
I'm trying to think. Oh, I have one. It's a great company. Strawsome. It's STRAWESOME. So they took the word straw and awesome, right? And they make glass straws. So I'm plugging for them, but they're really cool. So if you're into the plastic alternative movement, check out Strawsome. They have a great trademark. That's a great example of, kind of taking two elements and squishing them together. Those tend to be stronger types of trademarks, and they're enforceable. So there's also coined marks, right? So they're just like Exxon, EXXON, right? Like, what is that word? It's just some made up word. So the problem that's a strong trademark from a legal perspective, but it's a little challenging from a marketing perspective because when you hear Exxon, you don't know what the heck it is. You don't realize it's like an oil and gas company, right? But when you hear Strawsome, you might think, oh, okay, they do something with straws and they're awesome. So it's a fun trademark, portmanteau, suggestive of what it is. And that suggestiveness in trademarks, I think, really is a sweet spot. And I think I mentioned to you all before, Greg, that I think that your all's trademark is a good example, kind of suggestive of what you all do. Like, you're seeking something in the jungle, like in the Amazonian jungle. So that's a great example of a non-descriptive trademark. Enforceable, protectable, great from a legal perspective, really good from a marketing perspective too.
Great. Question from Mohammed says, please tell us what's the difference between brand registry and trademarking and how do they relate? Brand registry is a program from Amazon.com that gives users the ability to have some tools to help protect their brand it also gives them some additional marketing tools. Like if you go to an Amazon page and like below or where the product description is supposed to be, there's a whole bunch of additional information and pictures. That is someone who's using the enhanced brand content, which is a marketing tool underneath the Amazon.com brand registry program. Okay. So when we talk about brand registry, this is strictly under Amazon. The reason why this is commonly spoken about with trademarking is in order to register for the brand registry program on Amazon, you have to have a registered trademark. Now, a trademark is registered through a government organization like USPTO. I think I have that acronym right. And so you have to do that through a government organization, and then at which point you can register for the brand registry program. So that's what we're talking about. And just as another reminder, brand registry is not required to sell on Amazon by any means. It's more of like a nice to have. And a trademark also isn't required in order to start a business or sell products or anything else, okay? So if you want to find out, like, guys, more in detail about all those, I'd recommend you watch, I think it's episode 7 that we just released on Tuesday. We go into more detail about, you know, kind of like the philosophy or like general terms behind both of those different types of programs. All right, let's see what other questions we have here. Let's see. One's from David. He says, if you're competing for ranking with a competitor, will Amazon favor the competitor who is already brand registered? No, I haven't seen anything to lead me to believe that Amazon would favor a listing that has brand registry versus one that is not. So again, it's a nice to have, gives you additional brand protection and additional ways to like market your product, but I don't think that's factored into their ranking algorithm by any means. Here's a good one for you, Susie. Chris on YouTube asks, can a trademark be bought or sold? If yes, how do you transfer the ownership?
Oh, this is the beauty of trademarks. And this is the beauty of building brand value in your business, and something I preach on and harp on. And, you know, I think product selection, Greg, is very important, but I also think selecting a really good trademark is important too, because you have to think about how a brand is or your trademark is this intangible asset, right? You can't feel it, but you know what it is. Like Apple, you know, products. You go into an Apple store, you know what to expect. You have this certain feeling when you go into an Apple store, and you know, you open up your new Apple phone. You were talking about packaging the other day, you mentioned them, and I was just thinking about how awesome they are with their branding. But yes, that asset can be sold and transferred just like your tangible products. It can be licensed, which could probably be for another completely different conversation. But in terms of transferring, you take your current owner, and it depends on what the nature of the transfer is. A lot of times what I see is someone files an application in their name as an individual, and they get the mark registered, and then they later on, decide to form an LLC for their business, and there's some liability reasons why it makes a lot of sense for your LLC to hold or own the trademark. So basically you have an assignment document written up, signed, and they're recorded with the USPTO, which is the government body that Greg was talking about. And trademarks, again, because they act as source indicators, the public has to know the source. So when you file a trademark application, when you have a registration, your name or your company name will be associated with it. And when you record an assignment, the USPTO wants that information so the public can see who owns that trademark. What's the source of that intellectual property? So typically the assignment or transfer of ownership of the trademark is not a particularly complex thing. There are certain things that you kind of need to keep in mind. You want to make sure the goodwill is transferred with the trademark. With a pending application, you can only transfer it if it's currently in use and it's a use-based application. So there's some little nuances like that, but it's not particularly, complex process. But I think the what I love about this question is that, you know, you're really looking at and appreciating the fact that it's a property. It's something of value that you can't actually hold, but you know that there is some equity in that. And if you ever sell your company, you know, you might sell the brand. I mean, that might be what you sell. You know, your garlic presses are gone. They're rusting away in a landfill somewhere, but you still have your brand. Think about Harley Davidson, for example, the value of that brand. I mean, it could be worth more than all the motorcycles. And they make a ton of money just from licensing their mark. So that's stuff that you might want to think about later on down the road. Hopefully, as you continue to grow your brand and enforce it and make it stronger over time.
Right. Here's a question from Karen Demers on Facebook. Karen asks, can I change the terms of my trademark application while it sits for a few months waiting to be reviewed by the USPTO? Specifically, can I change the class? Good question.
That's a good question. It really depends. You cannot broaden the scope of your goods, okay, as originally filed. So if your application included garlic presses, and then like later on you're like, oh, I'm doing spatulas now, you can't add spatulas later on. The USPTO generally will not let you go outside the scope of the original application. Now, you probably will get an office action, and the examining attorney is going to ask you to possibly revise your goods, and there might be an opportunity at that point to see if there's a way that you can kind of, you know, squeeze in some, you know, maybe a different product. Usually doesn't work, but outright changing the class beforehand, it's not. You're probably not going to hear anything from the USPTO until, you know, 3 to 4 months from now. There's not really a whole lot you can do.
Okay. Here's a question from Instagram from David Martin Jr. David asks, do you have to have a product with your logo on it before you can apply?
No.
You want to tell us what you do have to have in order to apply?
You could have an intent to use the trademark. You could just be like, I have a bona fide, true intent to use this mark in commerce at some point. You don't actually have to be using it on the product when you file for it. So, but at some point during the application process, you are going to have to show the USPTO your use of the trademark. And as you're going through that process, if you file on an intent to use basis, you'll be issued what's called a notice of allowance. And at that point is when you'll need to show your use of the trademark on the product. After that notice of allowance date, the USPTO gives you 6 months to show first use or to show use of the mark, or you can file up to 5 6-month extensions. So you have 3 years from the date of the notice of allowance to actually start using your trademark, which I think is very generous.
Oh, great. This one's a little more complicated. This is from Olga Ling on YouTube. Susie, Olga asks, if I personally own my trademark, could I license it to my LLC without having the personal liability from what the LLC uses it for? And I understand we're getting into different facets of law there, but is there anything you'd like to say about that?
I don't know if I can directly answer her question. It is a little complex, and I feel like I would need to know a little bit more. In the US, you can't typically, if you're one of the normal people, the average people, it's kind of hard to move around assets to avoid liability. I would like to know what her motivation would be to just have it in her name and license to the company versus just sell it or just transferring it to the LLC. Now, if she's the licensor, the one that's licensing to the company, therefore the company would be the licensee, any problems, let's say it was a, what were those popular those hoverboards? Whatever.
Hoverboards, yeah.
Yeah. What are those kids doing these days? Yeah, so those hoverboards. Okay, let's say that you own a trademark and it was called Hover Mama. But you licensed it to your LLC to use Hover Mama on your LLC's hoverboards. Any issues that arose from that hoverboard that had your Hover Mama trademark on it will inure to you as the original owner. So you're not necessarily absolving or transferring liability. My suggestion is, you have your LLC for a reason, and part of that is liability protection, right? Like your business probably at some point should have something to think about, product liability insurance. I don't know if this is something that you all ever talk about, Greg, in this process. Might be worth talking about at some point, but I feel like in most instances when my clients come to me and they're like, I don't know if I should own it as an individual or my company, I'm like, unless you can really explain to me why you want it owned by you as an individual, it makes a lot more sense for the LLC to own the trademark for this very reason. If the hoverboard blows up, right? Whoever owns that trademark, that's where the liability issues are going to go to, and you want it to go to your LLC and not you as an individual. There's a reason you have that LLC.
And I think
that was helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful. And I've had a lot of legal entities over my days and spoken to a lot of lawyers about all these different liability mitigation issues. And like, if I were to just kind of like summarize that, like, there's different laws like piercing the corporate veil and everything else. And it's like whoever kind of like actually owns it, no matter what kind of like the paper says, is what it seems like the courts end up treating it as. And yeah, I don't know. That's one of like the beautiful things about like LLCs is like you can package all this up in them to protect your personal self. So like, why not do that? So yeah, I think that's
and it's usually not super expensive. I think it's expensive in California, but there's other jurisdictions that you can look at. I have clients that are international who have LLCs in like Nevada and Delaware. I don't do any LLC or corporate formation work, so I don't know the ins and outs or why they selected those. But I think it's smart from a personal protection standpoint. It's smart from helping you sleep better at night. It's good to keep your money separate. Like I think you need to have your business account over here and your personal over here, right? When you have all that commingling of funds, things can get kind of weird when it comes to liability too. So yeah, I'm one of those people that I'm overly kind of cautious on things like that. And I'm like, unless there's just a monetary reason you cannot do it, I have to encourage people to form that LLC or the corporate structure that makes sense for their personal situation and, business goals. It's a lot easier too, Greg, if you do want to carve off a brand and sell that brand. I think it makes a lot more sense when you have an LLC also.
Totally. I fully agree with all of that. All right. So Adventurous Human says, I'm a little confused. Eventually, do you want a trademark for your individual product names and overall brand names? And I think the answer to this is going to be the overall brand name. Like a product name within a brand's not as important to probably like protect with a trademark. Susie, you might disagree about that a little bit. Like as far as Amazon brand registry is concerned, you definitely only need the brand name trademark in order to register for that. Is there any, besides like if you're a giant company that the money means nothing to you, is there really much point of getting a registered trademark for like product names, not the brand, but the product in itself?
Generally, no. I'm like you, like as you get bigger and like, let's say that you want to kind of roll out a family of names, a family of trademarks that are all kind of related to each other or similar in some ways, like iPhone, iMac, iPad, McDonald's, French fries, McNuggets, whatever. You know what I mean? How all of those have their different trademarks. You could eventually do that too, but at the outset, I would just focus on that one main product. I don't know what Nike, of course. They're massive, but they have their swoosh logo, they have the word Nike registered, they have their Nike brand, business name. A lot of it really depends on your budget and your long-term goals. I feel like sometimes people start overextending themselves on protecting all of these different trademarks when they should really focus on sort of like their core marks or most important ones, because getting your trademark registered is just, it's great. You get to use the R in the circle, you get to enroll in brand registry, and of course there's other benefits to registration, but you have to enforce your trademarks too. And you know, that involves monitoring. You know, you might want to do that yourself, you might want to outsource it. If you come across infringers, you should send demand letters. So before you go broad by picking a bunch of different marks, you know, I kind of feel like people should focus more on going deep and, you know, having their core strong marks that they're focusing on.
Cool. Susie, we'll give you a second to catch your breath. I'll take this one. David Mock on YouTube asked, one last question. Once we find a competitive product, we make an added value change to it. Can we ask the supplier not to list this item in their store for 6 to 12 months? The answer to that is absolutely. It never hurts to ask. And you can, you know, you put in there a time frame of 6 to 12 months. But in my written agreement with the factories where I'm placing these orders, I put on there to requirement that they cannot list like my product that they make specifically for me. They can't like put it on any of their marketing or advertising, either on Alibaba or Global Sources or wherever, trade shows, whatever else. So no, to your answer is like, yeah, it never hurts to ask that. And it's really easy to get factories to agree to different types of things like this up front, like before you place your first order, like after you place your order, and you have just like a little bit less leverage on them. But you know, they're really eager to get that first like big order from you. So it's pretty easy to ask them to do things like that. All right, let's see. I saw another question here that I was going to answer that asked about if I think the question was, it's gone in the chat now, but is a trademark required to get a GTIN exemption on Amazon? And the answer to that is no. So once you are in the brand registry program on Amazon, you can select your unique identifier for your particular product. So it can just be like model number or whatever else. The GTIN exemptions, that would be if you don't have brand registry and don't have a trademark and don't want to get a UPC. I've never really heard of anyone being able to effectively get these GTIN exemptions. Let me know in the chat box if you know differently, but that's from what I understand. And I'm going to do a quick plug. Susie, we're almost to 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. We're like a few hundred away. So if everyone in the chat box could please subscribe, that's a big milestone, right? 100,000 subscribers, that's pretty sweet.
That's awesome. Yeah, congratulations, guys.
Thank you. Let's see. There's a bunch of questions in here that'd be good for you to answer, Susie. Let's see. This one's not necessarily about trademark law, but between the two of us, we could probably give them a little bit of help. It says, I have a Canadian corporation and planning to sell on Amazon US. Can my corporation have liability coverage in the US as an international seller? Should I have coverage? It seems like you're asking about a few different things there. You know, like one way to protect yourself from potential liability would be through the use of insurance. There's of course different types of insurance, whether that's product liability or general liability insurance, all different types of things. That'd be one way that you can use to protect yourself from liability. Another way to protect your personal self from different liabilities that you can happen upon through owning a business would be to own it through a corporate entity, which gives you a certain level of protection. You know, if you ask a lawyer who specializes in this, they're going to tell you all these different ways that you can kind of like poke holes in this. But as a general rule of thumb, that's very much true. And there's different types of legal entities that you can use. In the US, one that's very simple, inexpensive, and easy to set up is an LLC, in which that's what most people have, unless probably for tax purposes or you're getting more a larger corporation, then you start thinking about different types of entities. I know this isn't your specialty, Susie, but is there anything you would like to add to that?
I thought that was awesome.
All right, thank you.
One thing I will say though is you mentioned how, you know, a lot of attorneys will tell people how that corporate veil can be pierced, which is definitely something that people think about and they're like, oh, that's scary. But there are also things that people can learn and know to keep that from happening, right? And one of those kind of simple things is don't commingle funds, right? Like you have your business bank account and you have your personal bank account.
Just
So,
like the cleaner in general you can keep it, the better off you are, right? Like to register under everything under the proper legal entity, and you keep funds separate and bank accounts and all that good stuff, right? You pay
whatever
yourself
helps
out
you
of the
sleep
company.
good at night.
Yeah. All
Everyone
right.
has different levels of that, right?
Totally. We have one last question, Susie, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. This is a good one. It says, are trademarks time limited? Or another way to phrase this would just be, do they expire?
Oh, this is the beauty of trademarks. It's such a great question. Trademarks are so awesome because they can last forever. As long as you continue to use them, and if you have a registration, you do have to file the appropriate maintenance documents with the USPTO. And I'm not going to go into those deadlines or not. You'd probably want to talk to an attorney about that. But there are deadlines to maintain the registration. But as long as you're using your mark, as long as you're enforcing your mark, you can continue to own the mark and build rights to the mark. And I love giving examples of older trademarks that are really cool. Stella Artois and Lowenbrow are two beer marks that y'all have probably all heard of. And I think that they're from maybe the 1300s. That's pretty cool. And Jim Beam, I have to have a shout out to bourbon, right? Because I'm in Kentucky, but they've been around probably since at least the early 1900s. I can't remember their exact date of first use, maybe 1937. So these are marks that have been around for a really long time. Their owners are, continuing to control the trademark, enforce it. If there's any infringements out there, make sure it's the only one. Continue to build strength in it. Do proper licensing. One thing when you license your trademark, let's say that I own Jim Beam and I license keychains, I better make darn sure that those keychains are the way that I want them to look. There's a lot of quality control that goes on with licensing too. Something to think about, Olga, with your licensing situation. But yeah, trademarks, that's the great thing about trademarks. It's that one intellectual property that if you protect and enforce it and take care of it and love it, it can only get better over time.
Fantastic. All right, so I have a few announcements to make. The first one is the $1 Million Case Study Challenge winner gets 2 free months of the Jungle Scout web app. Congratulations, Stephen Sopneski. Congratulations, you are the winner of this week's giveaway. Shoot us an email at freedombuilders@junglescout.com and we will get you hooked up with your prize. The other one is we have called on you guys' help to help us name our keyboard tray. So drop in the comment section below your ideas for our brand name for our keyboard tray. We're going to be giving away Jungle Sticks, Jungle Snugs, Jungle Slumbers. We'll give away the keyboard tray once it's ready. We're giving away limited edition The Hustle is Real Jungle Scout t-shirt. So drop your ideas in the comment section below and we'll make sure to get the winner hooked up with our favorite brand name. Susie, thank you very much for coming on, taking an hour of your day to share all this very valuable information. Where can the audience find out more about you and if they're interested in getting your services?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun. So a lot of great questions. If you want to find me, I'm at theprivatelabellawyer.com. And also I have a free brand protection checklist. There's a lot of tips in this little checklist that I have that you can go grab. It's at mybrandbodyguard.com. Again, it's mybrandbodyguard.com. Go pick that up. And then I have one other little surprise in there for people. So
great. And we'll drop a link to mybrandbodyguard.com in the chat box. I think you're also on the Jungle Market, right, Susie? If anyone's interested.
I am. Yeah. I need to go in there and kind of flush out some of my information, but yeah. I'm on there.
Fantastic. So guys, thank you very much for tuning in. If you haven't already done so, we're almost at the 100,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. So we'd love it if you'd hit that subscribe button. Help us get to our goal for this week. Our goal is to hit it this week. So we need you guys' help. So thank you very much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Susie, it's been awesome. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.